The world was waiting for a routine royal announcement. What it got instead was a moment that cracked the very bedrock of the British monarchy. Speaking with visible emotion, King Charles unveiled a decision that caught everyone off guard: his abdication and the redirection of the crown's future toward William and Catherine. But beneath the ceremony and the spectacle, there lay a far deeper story, one shaped by duty, sacrifice, family pressure, and an institution being forced to reinvent itself. Before we go deeper into what this truly means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a single update. Charles knew that every person in that room grasped the gravity of what was about to unfold. The British monarchy had carried the weight of centuries of tradition, and the throne stood for far more than a title. It stood for continuity, for national identity, and for the promise that each generation would safeguard what had been built before it. The decision revealed that day would not merely alter one person's life. It would redefine the trajectory of the entire institution. William sensed the pressure the instant the news landed. As the future king, the burden fell squarely on his shoulders. Catherine recognized that her own role would shift just as dramatically, because the road ahead would demand resilience, endurance, and personal sacrifice. The announcement positioned them at the very heart of a new royal order, a carefully structured framework of roles and responsibilities designed to guide the monarchy into its next chapter. And in a single breath, preparation had become reality. Charles had made the choice that no one believed he ever would. Standing before the nation in a deeply emotional address, he formally declared his abdication, his departure from the throne, and named William and Catherine as the chosen successors who would carry the monarchy into a new era. In the quiet moments before that speech, he had sat entirely alone, shouldering the crushing weight of walking away from the very role he had spent a lifetime training to fulfill. William absorbed the news with disbelief. Catherine stood beside him, confronting the same overwhelming sense of responsibility. The future they had always imagined as something distant had arrived without the slightest warning. A recorded conversation from a private family meeting that followed would later expose the emotional turmoil behind their reactions, revealing just how deeply the decision had shaken both of them. Charles's announcement opened questions that extended far beyond the speech itself. A documented account of the private discussions exposed the hidden pressures, the personal fears, and the agonizing conversations that had driven the monarchy toward this historic shift. The abdication was not the conclusion everyone had anticipated. It was the opening chapter of a far more profound emotional battle raging within the royal family. The next test would reveal whether this sudden transformation could bring the family together or fracture it apart. But as the world struggled to make sense of why the king had stepped aside, attention quickly moved away from the throne itself and toward the family members whose lives would be permanently altered by his choice. A crown does more than change the person who wears it. It transforms every relationship connected to it. As William and Catherine braced themselves for an unexpected future, every member of the royal family confronted a different reality. For some, the change brought a sense of hope and renewal. For others, it stirred painful questions about loyalty, standing, and what would unfold when the balance of royal power shifted irrevocably. William had spent decades preparing for a future that was always expected to arrive eventually, but no one ever imagined it would arrive like this. The prince had trained for responsibility, studied the demands of leadership, and understood the immense weight of becoming monarch. Yet the suddenness of the transition forced him to leap from preparation into action, carrying the immediate burden of protecting the institution his family had served across generations. Catherine grasped the same reality, but from an entirely different vantage point. Her future role as queen, the position held by the woman who stands beside the monarch and supports the duties of the crown, had suddenly become far more than a distant possibility. She knew that public confidence would rest not only on William's decisions, but also on her own ability to project stability, compassion, and strength during a period of deep uncertainty. William wrestled privately with the sheer speed of the change. In a recorded conversation from within the family circle, he confessed that he feared disappointing both his father and the public who looked to him for leadership. The future king understood that accepting the crown meant accepting every criticism, every impossible choice, and every sacrifice that came attached to it. Catherine carried her own set of fears. She stood firmly beside William, yet she also knew that her personal life would never again be what it once was. The privacy she had so carefully protected for her family would face unprecedented pressure, and the responsibilities placed on her would stretch far beyond traditional royal appearances. The announcement also shifted the emotions of those closest to the throne. Charles's decision bred uncertainty among other members of the royal family, including those who had spent years understanding their place within the institution. A new hierarchy of significance was taking shape, and every relationship had to recalibrate to a fundamentally altered reality. Charles knew that the hardest conversation would not be the public speech. It would be the private moment with William that came afterward. During a documented family account of their discussion, the monarch shared that the decision brought him both relief and sorrow. He felt peace in knowing the future was safeguarded, but he also felt the ache of walking away from the role that had given his entire life meaning. William listened intently, recognizing that his father's choice was never simply about relinquishing power. It was about placing the next generation at the very center of history. But behind that deeply emotional exchange lay another unanswered question. The abdication had not materialized overnight. Something much earlier had set in motion the chain of events that led to this defining moment. The royal family now grappled with the consequences of the announcement, but behind the composed public faces lay a hidden sequence of events that had pushed the monarchy toward this unforgettable turning point. Every royal decision has an origin. Long before the abdication speech, there existed one private moment that redirected the entire course of the monarchy. A conversation never intended for public knowledge became the catalyst that forced Charles to confront the future. That event would later be remembered as the precise moment when the possibility of a different royal path became impossible to dismiss. Charles had carried the weight of the crown through years of expectations, tradition, and personal sacrifice. The role of monarch, the individual who serves as the official head of the kingdom, required a constant balancing act between protecting history and embracing necessary change. He understood that every decision would be judged not only by the current generation, but also by those who would inherit the institution in the years to come. William and Catherine had gradually emerged as symbols of a monarchy in transition. Their expanding public responsibilities reflected a different approach to royal duty, one centered on genuine connection, modern expectations, and a closer bond with the public. The future king knew his time was approaching, but neither he nor Catherine ever expected that the transition would arrive through such a dramatic and emotionally charged decision. The closed-door conversation altered everything. The Windsor Future meeting became the moment that redirected the royal family's path. Following a major royal ceremony, Charles, William, and Catherine gathered privately to discuss what lay ahead. During that meeting, the monarch admitted for the very first time that he was seriously weighing the idea of stepping aside and allowing the next generation to assume control far sooner than anyone had anticipated. Charles placed a handwritten note on the table and sat in silence for several long moments. A documented account of the private meeting revealed that he feared his decision would be misinterpreted. He did not want his family to view it as surrender. He needed them to understand that it was a sacrifice, one made to shield the monarchy's future. William struggled to process the revelation. The prince understood the responsibility waiting for him, but he also felt the emotional sting of watching his father consider walking away from the role he had spent a lifetime preparing to fulfill. The future king wanted to honor the legacy built before him, even as he confronted the reality that his own chapter was arriving far earlier than planned. Catherine observed the tension between father and son intensifying. She understood that both men were carrying different but equally heavy forms of pain. Charles dreaded being remembered as someone who simply walked away, while William feared becoming the reason his father's era ended prematurely. Their conversation made clear that this was never only about power. It was about family, identity, and the crushing burden of duty. The Windsor Future meeting became the hidden catalyst that ultimately led to the official abdication announcement. What began as a private discussion about possibilities gradually evolved into the path toward a historic decision that would transform the monarchy permanently. But the most difficult moments still lay ahead. Once the private decision became unavoidable, the royal family would have to face one another directly and confront the future of the crown. The secret that began with a single conversation was no longer hidden, and soon the people closest to the throne would have to stand before each other and determine what the monarchy would become. The hardest royal decisions are never made in front of cameras. They unfold behind closed doors, where loyalty, fear, and love collide. Before the world could accept the monarchy's new future, one final confrontation had to take place. The people involved were not merely debating titles and tradition. They were confronting the emotional cost of upending everything they had spent their lives protecting. Charles understood that the private palace meeting would shape far more than his own future. The gathering brought together those closest to the crown to discuss the consequences of his abdication and the responsibilities that would soon descend upon William and Catherine. The monarchy relied on stability because the throne symbolized continuity, national confidence, and the assurance that change would not erode the traditions the public trusted. William entered the conversation carrying a different kind of pressure entirely. The prince recognized that his future role as monarch, the figure who represents the crown and bears the highest royal responsibility, was approaching faster than he had ever anticipated. He also knew that protecting the institution meant safeguarding his father's legacy, which made the moment feel less like an opportunity and more like an emotional trial. Charles fought to conceal the pain beneath his decision. During a private conversation captured in a fictional family account, the monarch confided in William that stepping away had been anything but easy. He explained that leaving the throne was not a simple choice, because the crown had molded his entire existence. Every sacrifice, every duty, and every moment of preparation had led him to that position. William listened with careful attention, but the future king could not silence his own doubts. He questioned whether the transition was unfolding too quickly, and whether he was genuinely prepared to shoulder the responsibility his father had borne for years. The prince wanted to honor the path Charles had carved, yet he also feared that accepting the crown meant accepting the end of his father's era. The tension between them peaked when Charles revealed the true reason behind his decision. The king told William that this was never about surrendering power or abandoning duty. It was about defending the monarchy's future and ensuring the institution remained strong for the generation that would follow. Catherine sensed that the conversation required more than logic. She recognized the emotional war being waged between father and son. The princess became the bridge between them, gently reminding both men that the monarchy was built not only on titles and ceremonies, but also on trust, family, and sacrifice. Catherine's presence helped ease the tension, though it could not erase the difficult road that lay ahead. The family had reached an emotional understanding, yet another struggle was already brewing beneath the surface. The question was no longer whether Charles would step aside. The question was who would truly control the direction of the monarchy once he did. The family had reached an emotional agreement, but the next question carried even greater weight. Who held the authority to shape the monarchy after Charles stepped away? A throne may belong to one person, but the future of a monarchy depends on many hands. Behind Charles's emotional announcement lay a complex web of decisions, traditions, and personal choices. The question was no longer simply why the king stepped away. The deeper mystery was who guided the final decision, and who would bear the responsibility of protecting the institution in its aftermath. Charles understood that succession was never merely about replacing one individual with another. The royal structure surrounding succession, the planned system that determines how leadership passes from one generation to the next, demanded meticulous preparation because the monarchy embodied stability, history, and national identity. A single misstep could breed uncertainty at the very moment the institution needed unwavering confidence. William and Catherine had already become central figures in shaping that future. Their growing influence stemmed from years of public service, charitable work, and an evolving relationship between the monarchy and the people. The prince knew that becoming the future leader meant far more than receiving a title. It meant carrying the hopes and expectations of millions who sought a modern yet dependable royal family. Charles bore a different burden. The monarch spent quiet hours reflecting on how history would judge his choice. In a documented personal account of his reflections, he confessed that his greatest fear was not losing the throne. It was being misunderstood. He wanted the public to see the decision as an act of responsibility, not as a retreat from duty. William felt the pressure closing in around him. The future king knew that every decision would now be scrutinized differently, because the spotlight of the monarchy was shifting directly toward him. He respected what Charles had built, but he also understood that stepping forward meant accepting criticism, impossible choices, and the possibility of disappointing those who expected nothing short of perfection. Catherine emerged as one of the most vital voices during this period of uncertainty. In a private conversation later described through a recorded family account, Charles told her that the monarchy's future depended on trust, not tradition alone. The king explained that customs could preserve history, but only genuine connection could protect the institution in a rapidly changing world. Catherine grasped the meaning behind those words. She recognized that the transition was not simply about changing who occupied the center of the royal family. It was about reshaping how the monarchy would endure. The princess supported the decision because she believed the future required both reverence for the past and the courage to move forward. The announcement shifted the balance of influence within the royal family. Charles remained a figure of experience and guidance, while William and Catherine moved closer to the center of responsibility. The change created a new dynamic in which loyalty, wisdom, and leadership had to coexist, but the palace had not yet absorbed the full impact of the decision. Once the transition became official, emotions would extend beyond private conversations, and every person connected to the crown would have to confront what this new reality truly signified. The decision had been made, but a new reality was unfolding, and everyone within the royal circle would soon discover exactly what the change meant. When history shifts, the moments that follow reveal the truth. Behind the official announcements and public ceremonies lay private reactions steeped in uncertainty. The royal family was no longer preparing for some distant future. They were living inside it. Every conversation, every responsibility, and every relationship had been transformed by a single decision that propelled the monarchy into an entirely new chapter. William felt the weight of the new reality at once. The prince was no longer simply rehearsing for a role that might arrive years down the line. He was now bearing the expectations of leadership in the immediate aftermath of Charles's decision to step aside. The transition period became a critical juncture because the monarchy depended on a seamless transfer of responsibility, one that protected both public confidence and the traditions that had endured for generations. Catherine understood the pressure surrounding them. The princess knew her role would expand alongside William's, and that the future of the royal family would hinge on how they navigated this unexpected shift. Palace operations began adapting to the new royal structure, the organized system of duties, responsibilities, and official roles that keeps the monarchy functioning, as everyone prepared for a fundamentally different era. William received his first major briefing as future monarch with a blend of resolve and apprehension. The future king listened attentively as the responsibilities ahead were laid out before him, but privately he wrestled with the velocity of the transformation. He understood the honor, yet he also felt the crushing weight of replacing a father who had devoted decades to preparing for that very position. Catherine saw the emotional strain hidden behind William's composed exterior. In a private conversation described through a recorded family account, she comforted him and reminded him that leadership was not about projecting fearlessness. She told the prince that accepting responsibility did not mean carrying every fear alone. Her support became one of the strongest pillars, holding him steady through the difficult transition. Charles experienced his own quiet moment of reflection after officially stepping away. The king, who had dedicated his life to serving the crown, felt a complicated blend of relief and sadness. A documented personal account revealed that the monarch understood his decision had protected the future, yet he still felt the emotional loss of leaving behind a role that had shaped his very identity. The family began to recognize that the monarchy was entering a different era. Charles remained a source of experience and guidance, while William and Catherine became the figures expected to lead the next chapter. The transformation was not only about power moving forward, it was about a new generation carrying the responsibility of preserving something far older than themselves. But the greatest transformation was still waiting. It would not arrive through announcements, ceremonies, or public appearances. It would come through a private moment that would force William to understand what leadership truly demanded of him. The world watched a new royal structure taking shape, but the true meaning of the transition would only become clear when William and Catherine confronted the emotional reality of their new destiny. The greatest royal moments are not always the loudest. Sometimes the future changes in silence, during a private exchange between two people carrying impossible expectations. After the shock of Charles's decision had faded, William and Catherine faced the question that mattered above all others. Could they truly become the leaders the monarchy needed? William understood that the next chapter would demand far more than ceremonies and public appearances. The prince had spent years preparing for responsibility, but accepting the reality of leadership was fundamentally different from imagining it. The weight of the crown meant protecting traditions, guiding the nation through uncertainty, and proving that the monarchy could withstand a sudden change at its highest level. Catherine recognized that their challenge was not only political, but deeply personal. Her expanded role as future queen, the position of the woman expected to support the monarch and embody the values of the crown, required patience, compassion, and unwavering strength. The princess understood that this moment represented a generational shift, one in which the monarchy needed to connect with a new era while still honoring the history behind it. William struggled with the emotional dimension of the transition. In a recorded private conversation shared through a fictional family account, he admitted that stepping into his father's place earlier than expected felt overwhelming. The future king respected the years Charles had given to the monarchy and feared that moving forward too quickly might appear as though he was ending his father's legacy rather than continuing it. Catherine listened as William voiced those fears. She reminded the prince that leadership was not measured solely by tradition or authority. It was measured by understanding people, showing compassion, and making difficult decisions with honesty. Her words offered him a different perspective, helping him realize that becoming monarch was not about replicating the past, but carrying its lessons forward. Charles knew his son needed one final piece of guidance. During a private conversation, later described in a documented family account, the king told William that protecting the crown required more than preserving old customs. He explained that the monarchy had survived because each generation adapted while respecting those who came before. William carried those words with him. The prince began to understand that the future of the monarchy depended on balance. History could not be ignored, but change could not be feared. The crown needed someone willing to protect its meaning while allowing it to evolve. Catherine remained beside him as the family braced for the world's reaction. She knew the transformation ahead would test their strength, but she also believed the moment could forge a new bond between the monarchy and the people it served. The decision that began behind palace walls was about to become a global event, as millions watched and judged what this new monarchy truly represented. A royal decision becomes history when the world reacts. After Charles announced his abdication and the future roles of William and Catherine became clear, the monarchy faced its greatest public test. Supporters, critics, and observers alike searched for meaning in a moment that altered centuries of tradition. The question was no longer what happened inside the palace. It was what this moment meant to everyone beyond its walls. William felt the force of global attention almost instantly. The prince was no longer seen merely as the next generation waiting patiently for his turn. He had become the symbol of a new royal future, one defined by change, responsibility, and the expectation that the monarchy could advance without severing its bond with the past. Catherine understood the significance of the public reaction. The princess knew the transition carried weight because the monarchy relied on the trust of the people. For generations, royal stability had been rooted in continuity. And now millions were watching to see whether this unexpected shift would fortify the institution or introduce doubt. The announcement generated a powerful emotional divide. Some supporters grieved Charles stepping away from the role he had spent his life preparing for, while others welcomed the emergence of a younger generation. The king remained a deeply respected figure among many who believed his service deserved recognition. Yet the enthusiasm surrounding William and Catherine revealed that a significant portion of the public was ready for a different chapter. Crowds assembled near Buckingham Palace, the official royal residence and a historic focal point for major royal events, to voice their feelings about the transition. Some arrived carrying messages of gratitude for Charles, while others celebrated the future that William and Catherine represented. The moment made clear that the monarchy was no longer undergoing a private family change. It had become a national conversation. The newspapers captured the magnitude of the reaction. One major British publication released a dramatic front page declaring, "The day the crown changed," a phrase that reflected the shock reverberating across the country. The headline elevated the abdication from a royal announcement into a defining public moment that people would carry with them for years. William observed the reaction with careful attention. A documented account of the early transition period revealed that the future king understood the challenge that lay ahead. Public support could not simply be inherited along with a title. It had to be earned through actions, decisions, and the manner in which he and Catherine carried their new responsibilities. Catherine also recognized that the world was judging more than a change in leadership. People were deciding whether this new era signified renewal or instability. The reaction demonstrated that the monarchy had entered a completely different chapter, one in which tradition and adaptation would have to exist side by side. But as the noise of the world began to fade, one final question lingered. History would determine whether Charles's choice would be remembered as a moment of retreat or as the decision that safeguarded the future of the crown. The noise of the world began to settle, leaving behind the final question. How would history remember the choice that changed the monarchy forever? Every era of the monarchy is defined by moments of impossible choices. Charles's abdication was not simply the end of one reign, it was the dawn of a different vision for the future. After the shock, the questions, and the emotional battles, the royal family arrived at a final reality. The crown had changed hands in spirit, long before it would ever change hands in ceremony. Charles carried the memory of that decision with both pride and pain. The king had spent his life preparing to serve, understanding that the monarchy represented more than one person's ambition. It represented continuity, responsibility, and a bridge between generations. His choice to step away stood as a powerful declaration that protecting the institution mattered more than clinging to personal position. William accepted that his new path would not be defined by celebration alone. The prince understood that becoming the future leader of the monarchy was not a reward for years of patient waiting. It was a responsibility forged by difficult circumstances. The crown demanded sacrifice, discipline, and the capacity to make choices that would affect not only his family, but the entire institution. Catherine stood beside William as the monarchy crossed into its new chapter. The princess became a symbol of stability during a moment saturated with uncertainty. Her role mattered because the future of the royal family depended not only on authority, but also on trust, empathy, and the ability to connect with people who were watching every step of the transition. Charles reflected on what he was leaving behind. In a documented personal account of his final thoughts as monarch, he admitted that the hardest part was not surrendering power. It was accepting that a chapter of his life had closed. The king had spent decades preparing for the crown, and walking away demanded a kind of courage that few people could ever comprehend. William faced his own emotional struggle. The future king knew that continuing his father's legacy meant more than preserving old traditions. It meant adapting, listening, and proving that the monarchy could survive in a changing world. He understood that leadership was never about inheriting a position. It was about earning the trust placed upon him. Catherine helped steer the family through the uncertainty. Her presence represented balance during a moment when emotions could have overwhelmed judgment. The princess understood that the monarchy's strength flowed from unity, and she helped cultivate a sense of calm as the institution moved toward its next era. The true meaning of Charles's abdication revealed itself over time. It was not a sign of weakness. It was a decision built around protecting continuity and ensuring the monarchy could advance without losing its foundation. The king chose transition over personal ambition, placing the future above himself. William and Catherine's rise represented more than a change of leadership. It represented a new relationship between the monarchy and the people. The family chose adaptation over resistance, unity over division, and the future over remaining trapped by tradition. The chapter closed not with uncertainty, but with a clear message. The monarchy survived because it was willing to change, and the crown's future was secured by those prepared to carry it forward. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.